We're in this together. How can I help you?
We will lead people to real equality in this country.
To fight against oppression by any means necessary.
What you're doing is just. Never question that.
Brothers and sisters, are you ready?
I believe you're going to do great things.
We must be a little daring. We can change the course of history.
That was just part of the new trailer for the new season of the National Geographic series entitled Genius MLKX. The show chronicles the public and personal lives of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, with a particular focus on the legacies of their wives, Coretta Scott King and Dr. Betty Shabazz. And joining us now, two of the show's co-stars, Wayruche Opia, who plays Coretta Scott King, and Jamie Lawson, who plays Dr. Betty Shabazz. Thank you so much for coming on. I love this angle, looking at really the personal lives of these two couples, of these four individuals. Wayruche, I'll start with you. What did you learn about Coretta Scott King, about the relationship that you brought to light in this?
Oh, I learned so much. I'm British, so we don't actually have that much information, and it's not taught about Martin Luther King or Coretta Scott King or Malcolm X or Betty Shabazz. And so when I got this job, it was a wonderful opportunity to completely educate myself and be part of the process of educating a new generation and the next generation about Coretta Scott King and Martin. I think especially the women have been sidelined a lot in the civil rights movement, and so I think that was definitely a highlight for me, to be part of highlighting the women and their contributions to the movement.
Absolutely. Right.
The thing that amazes me about you doing this, I'm so excited, is I knew both women. I was too young to know Malcolm. I was about 8 when he was killed, and I only saw Dr. King twice. I was 12 when he got killed. But I got to know both their widows. Mrs. King was responsible for me learning how to be a little more, let's say,
pragmatic. You get out of the tracksuit,
right? Right. I worked closely with her son. He got us together. And Betty Shabazz is my two daughters' godmother. So I knew both of them. Talk about how both of them were not just housewives, but they were the ones that really drove their husbands. They were partners. Coretta Scott King was the co-pilot of the civil rights movement. And Betty Shabazz kept Malcolm strong. And I used to hear them over and over again talk about this when they would counsel and talk to me in private. Talk about that.
I love the fact that you said they weren't just housewives, because you don't have a Malcolm X and a Dr. Martin Luther King without women, wives who were of like minds, that were also dreamers, that were also activists, right? These were women who challenged their ideals and really parceled through a lot of the sermons and messages that they were going to speak about. And they were gravitated to these women for that they had a mind of their own, that they had dreams and aspirations of their own. I think history has done this weird thing of making it seem as though women now have just started to have agency, as if that wasn't a thing ever before. And so one of the things that I love that this show is doing is highlighting the fact that Coretta and Betty were women of agency, that really fought side by side with their husbands for the movement and for their community.
And obviously, the relationship between the two men was fraught, right? They had different views of how civil rights should be pursued. So I'm curious, from both of your points of view, starting with you, Wayruche, which is, what was the relationship like between the two women, between their wives?
I don't think they ever met until after their husbands were taken from them. But what we also found and discussed was that they were two women who, although they were living separate lives, were living the same life. They had the same experiences, you know, having their husbands being on the road, chasing the movement, and being home, taking care of the children, and still being that support system for their husbands. So I think they definitely lived similar lives. And when they met, I can imagine imagine it was just a kindred spirit kind of situation.
Yes.
Rev, talk about the creative friction between the two. That may be a polite way to put it
Yeah,
now. But how they both had their agendas, came from completely different points, and yet moved civil rights.
No,
down
well,
the
Dr. King led the nonviolent church-based a movement basically in the South. Malcolm X was a lieutenant of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and was Muslim and was more self-defense. And I grew up in the North, following Dr. King wasn't exactly popular. but I think that the thing that is touching about what they're saying is both women did get together after both were killed. I remember when Betty Shabazz was burned, which led to her burns with her grandson, that I was at the hospital with Yasa, the daughter, and Mrs. King came to see Betty Shabazz in the hospital before she died. And I think what's more important, which you could address, both of them kept their movements going.
Yes.
There wouldn't have been a legacy or holiday for Dr. King without Coretta Scott King.
Yes.
And there wouldn't have been a recognition of Malcolm X without Betty Shabazz.
At all. These women, that's what, it goes back to that point earlier of these women had to have some level of agency in order to know how to continue their legacy, because or else history would have completely erased both men. Let's be very clear. And so there was a knowing fight that both women had to continue on the work even after their husbands were taken from them. And just to touch on a point earlier that you said about their relationship, the men being fraught, I think this series is going to do a wonderful job of correcting that narrative, because what we will see is that it wasn't so much that they had a fraught relationship. They just had different points of views and different ways in to reach different audiences, different people that Martin couldn't reach Malcolm's audience and Malcolm couldn't reach Martin's. And so we'll see the ways in which they echo each other and side by side, how they actually throughout history come together in a certain way to really spearhead this movement.
Wow.
And talk about what I find fascinating about both of their stories that hardly anybody knows now are the final years, the struggles. We see Martin Luther King, the March on Washington, and we don't see him struggling over the next 3, 4, 5 years as he starts to lose support. Malcolm X, of course, we all know more about sort of those internal struggles with the movement. But talk about that the ends of their lives being so difficult.
I think the show does a wonderful job in showing the lives, the personal lives as well. I mean, these men were incredibly young when they started doing the work they did. They were both killed at 39, and which is bizarre because that means they started from like 20s, mid-20s, and so they were still figuring their lives out while creating and being part of this incredible movement that we are now still part of, you know, experiencing. So this show, I think, does a wonderful job in showing, you know, the struggles, the anxieties, the fear, because we see what these men have done. We've seen their almost like greatest hits, but where in the show tries to show the intricacies, you know, the humanity of them. I'm sure they were terrified. I'm sure they were scared, you know, dealing with families and all sorts, but they were so convinced about what they were doing that they were willing to risk it all, and it paid off.
Let's, as we close, take a look at a scene in which your characters are preparing their husbands to go to Capitol Hill to advocate for the passage of the Civil Rights Act.
So I had 3 choices.
None of this would have been possible without you.
Well, they haven't passed it yet, and Senator Thurmond is doing all that he can to make sure it never happens.
You should invite the senator to Montgomery. Show him what happens to those who fight on the side of never.
You sure you want to go through with this? These people will try to run you out of town.
Well, you know I don't run.
And walk fast.
The first 2 episodes of Genius MLKX premiere today on National Geographic and start streaming tomorrow on Disney Plus and Hulu. The first episode will also air tonight on ABC at 9 o'clock Eastern. Wei Ruche, Ophia, and Jamie Lawson, thank you both very much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, good to meet you. Good luck.
Thank you.
And that